I'm super excited about today. I hope everyone else joining us today is as well, because we're talking about something in tech that often never gets talked about enough, and that is accessibility. Every single website or every major website that you think about thinks about this all the time. And today, hopefully, Homar will help us figure out how to break into this uh, career field. He's an OG. I probably don't want to give away how long it's been in the industry for, but it's been a minute, a hot minute.
Been
And
a
he has
hot
a
minute,
background
yeah.
in psychology and neurology, which I think it's such a great background to have for this specific tech job. Welcome to the podcast.
Right on, right on. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, man.
We've been having a lot of interesting conversation, backstage, and I think it's probably interesting that we're talking about that, because I think it does have a tie to it, which is
Mhm.
something around, something that we both probably share, which is, just understanding, where things are, how to move things around, etc. And it's fascinating that we're also talking about accessibility. So, for people who don't understand what that is, what exactly is it?
Accessibility is UX, to be
Mm,
honest. It is like when we think about it from a legal perspective, it is ensuring that products are accessible to people with disabilities. We
mm,
have the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines that have success criteria that lay out how products should be built and designed so that they can support people who have disabilities.
mm,
We need to be able to build products that anyone can use, right? And so it's like throughout my career, because I've been doing this, I've been working in accessibility since 2001.
mm,
And my first foray into it, I was actually introduced to it by lawyers, not in a bad way. It's just that the
mm,
company that I was working for at the time, they were like, "Hey," and this was back when Flash was it, right? Whatever you build also has to be accessible. Well, we knew good and well Flash was definitely not it. So I had to build an HTML counterpart to everything.
mm,
So it was all about making sure that all of our users had access to the content that we were putting out.
mm,
Whether it's, but accessibility is goes far beyond the digital space. It's also the real world space. Curb cuts when you're walking on the street, when you look at the ramp, that's an accessibility feature.
mm,
um, the way architects lay out floor plans now, and the way buildings are constructed, there is a minimum distance or minimum width so that anyone who has mobility issues, if they are in a wheelchair or whatnot, they have enough space to be able to maneuver around. You have to have the clearance that's there. You
mm,
see stairs and you see ramps and you see lifts or elevators there to help people get into these spaces. We need to be able to do the same thing from a technical perspective.
mm.
And you asked what is accessibility, and I said it's UX, because at the end of the day, regardless of your ability, we're all people who are trying to do something, whether it's
Mm,
for our job or whether it's for entertainment or whatever.
mm,
Even just watching us here, is this platform accessible? It is a user experience. So
mm.
if we start to think of it that way, we are really just removing the friction points and the barriers that prevent people from being able to use our products effectively.
That is beautifully said, and I didn't think about that analogy. The way that you kind of like describe that being the ramps or the
Mhm.
parking spaces, specialized parking spaces, etc. In the same way online. One of my first, not first, but like the first time it hit me was, I'd made a deck in one of my previous roles, and someone pointed out that while it's good that you have all those different icons to in different colors to depict, you also have to understand that also people who don't see colors the same. So
Mhm.
in as much as you're using color, can you also use shapes to denote that change so that it's, ADA compliant. And that's when I started to learn initially. There was something that used to be popular on social media, not so much anymore. I don't see them any much anyway, like, things like alt text, and things like that.
Hmm.
Just different ways to make content more accessible, or more a thoughtful way to use content in a way that helps other people who may not have the same, or who are, differently able to be able to
Hmm.
access that content.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly it. I mean, we even have to be careful these days with how we use emojis, because
Mm,
emojis don't always come across the same way across different platforms.
mm,
Someone who's using a screen reader, you see a social post where there's just tons of emojis in there.
mm,
When that gets read back via, a screen reader, it's rubbish. It
mm,
provides no context for the user on that
mm,
end. It's absolutely noisy. So, even myself, I used to be guilty of putting tons of emojis in there. It was like I've dialed that back for that, for that very reason. But yeah, we just
so,
accessibility is invisible when you do it
mm,
right. Because just like now, we logged on, our cameras are working, the mics are working, everything is working as it should, right?
mm,
That's because we expect it to do that.
mm,
And so when you build in accessibility, people are expecting things to work as they should. And so when it works, it's quiet. No one's complaining
mm,
about it because they're not hindered. We're not hindered by doing this. So
mm,
that's why it often goes unnoticed.
mm. So, like I said, this doesn't get talked about enough, right? Which probably should make even the role a bit more accessible. But speaking of that,
Mhm.
what does it take to build a career, or anyone will be lucky to build the kind of career you built, but just even build any career in accessibility engineering, what does it take to go from 0 to 1?
Oh man. To be honest, it takes time. It
Mm.
takes time. And it's wild that we're having this conversation because I kid you not, this is literally the third time I've had this conversation this week.
That
Right.
is that is wild.
It is wild. It is like any other time, nobody's asking. But this week, it's been it. But it takes time.
Mm,
Um, it wasn't always on my radar. I've been designing and building websites since 1994. Let
mm.
that set in. I started with HTML1. You
Wow.
know,
It's on 5 right now.
yeah, we on five right now, but we've been on five for a minute. But
Yeah.
I started with HTML1. I'm
Mm,
walking on campus and I see one of my friends, Iona. She's walking by and she was a comp sci major. And I'm bugging her. I'm like, hey, Iona, how do you build a website? She just pick up a book and then walked off. I'm like, okay. So I saw her the next day, same thing, pick up a book. And I'm like, stop. What book do I pick up? She said, an HTML book. Boom. That's where you start. Start with an HTML book. I bought my first HTML book from the bookstore, went down to the computer lab, had my first website built in 8 hours.
mm,
All right. Because I was reading, building, reading, making mistakes, a lot of trial and error. I didn't
mm,
go to school for web dev or anything like that. This has always been a hobby of mine. I was in school originally for engineering and psychology,
mm,
you know, but I wanted to be able to create these web experiences. Then I got good at the fundamentals. That's what that HTML1 book taught me, the fundamentals. I started to understand how semantic HTML worked. Did I know then how it would apply now? No, it was just this is how you build a website.
mm,
Start with that foundation. Then, as the web, matured and we started getting other technologies, I started to see how those technologies could actually benefit a sound structure from that, originally from the foundation of HTML. So now we have CSS, we have JavaScript, right? It wasn't until I landed in that corporate position when I was building Flash applications all day long and they hit me with, we need this content to be accessible to someone who may be using a screen reader. Okay. So now you piqued my interest. So now it's not even just a matter of keeping my job, because at this time I'm managing 47 websites throughout all of South America. I'm responsible for those. It didn't matter if marketing team spent $15 million on a marketing campaign. If what I put out did not pass legal's accessibility standards, it didn't launch. So now it's like, all right, how do I make these things? What does it mean to make something accessible? Oh, well, you start with semantic HTML. Cool, check. I got that. Good deal. Oh, there's this thing called color contrast. All right, so now then I'm working with other designers, because I used to manage a team. They were in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I would work with my designers to make sure that, our color contrast was where it needed to be. Let's make sure that we are building all of these to pass our legal standards at that time, right? Then over time, I started to build that muscle to where I could look at code and tell if it was accessible or not. I could look at a design and tell if it was going to have some issues. And then as I continued further, I got introduced to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. I had glanced at them before, earlier in my career, but now it's really becoming a thing. And so as I started reading through the WCAG, which is what I call it, you'll hear it called by different things, but the WCAG, and at this point, I think we were just on the tail of 1.0, going into 2.0, I think. I'm reading through it and I'm seeing how each success criteria actually applied to how HTML was written. When you become a developer, you have to already make peace with, you are in a profession that is a lifetime of learning. Not saying that other professions aren't the same way. If you're a doctor, yes, you got to stay up with modern trends and technology and things like that. But when it comes to tech, as fast as tech moves, as fast as it evolves, you definitely have to keep up with it or get left behind, right? So when I started to see how HTML was starting to lag, that's when I dug in deeper and was like, all right, how do I align my HTML with the WCAG when things are coming out? Okay, now I see what the lawyers were talking about when they were speaking about how content was written or how our icons. You had mentioned earlier about just having icons and those not being accessible. All right, cool. Well, then I started thinking about, what does this icon actually mean? More specifically, what does this icon mean to me? Then I would ask others, what does this icon mean to you? And you start to see that there's a division in how people even perceive content that seems like it's common knowledge. So it's like, okay, we are all individuals. We are all going to do things different. As a designer, I would design a happy path of navigation through an application. But through user testing, I found that people did not always follow that happy path that I put in there. Again, this is that learning that's coming through. I quickly realized that accessibility was not a sprint. It's not something that you're just going to get and be done with it. No, it's definitely a marathon. And I've been running this marathon since 2001. So it starts with learning the fundamentals, learning how the internet works, and more specifically, learning how the browser works with the components that are used to build web pages, learning how semantic HTML behaves in a browser, learning how CSS affects that semantic HTML, learning how JavaScript affects that semantic HTML, Then also you take the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and you read through that. It's broken into 4 sections: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. But it also has 3 levels to it. You have level A, double A, and triple A. Now, it sounds like a lot, sounds daunting, but once you actually start to look at the breakdown, it actually really does make sense. Not everything that we build will conform to every single rule in the WCAG. So you'll work on a product. If you don't have video in your product, you don't have to worry about the criteria that pertains to video, right? So it's narrowing down the focus on the needs and expectations of what your application does. Then over time, you start to broaden your scope to pull in everything else. And that's what I've had to do over the years while still working as, an engineer. So for 6.5 years, when I was with that corporation, after the first year, dealing with accessibility became second nature,
Mm.
because I started to look for it. And then even after I left there and I went off and I led a team for an e-commerce company, everyone that I hired had to have some accessibility knowledge. Was I expecting them to have the same knowledge that I had? No. If they did, great. But I did not expect everyone to have that type of training. Bro, I sat in a room full of lawyers for 8 hours a day for an entire week learning about accessibility from a legal perspective.
Mm.
Not everybody's going to fall into that. There wasn't a whole lot of documentation out there that was readily being circulated that everyone was talking about,
I could just go read up and just find all that information.
Yeah, yeah. And, what accessibility has just been booming over the past 6, 7 years, close to 9 years, maybe. But before then, it was just a whisper. You only came across it if you came across it. So, my teammates, I showed them how to author accessible code markup. I showed them what to look for. My background as a psychologist helped with understanding UX and human behavior. Taking that with the personas, the demographic that we knew that we were serving, and then expanding it to include other users is how it all really started to solidify. And to be honest, even though I was working with accessibility and speaking about it at conferences and things like that, it wasn't actually something that I saw as a career path, not until like 2016.
So what changed?
What changed was dealing with a lawsuit with a company. And my dad, when I was growing up, my dad has this saying, never give him an excuse. And what he means by that is don't give anyone an excuse to deny you. You make it a burden for them to turn you away. Cool. So here I am working with this group and see this project that they're working on. And I'm calling out issues immediately. Also, the team that I'm working with, calling out issues immediately. That's not accessible. That's not accessible. Just to paint a picture, one of the bigger issues that we saw was, imagine a full screen modal with a white background. The close button for that modal was white with a drop shadow. We're in the meeting. It's like, nobody's going to see that, but the leadership of that company at that time, they didn't want to listen to us. Like, all right, cool, bet. You know what? I can't care more about your project than you
do.
So cool. This is what it is. Well, they end up getting sued. Then after that happened, it's like they call us back up. Like, yeah, we need help. Let me guess. The accessibility issues. Yes. All right, cool. I put together a remediation plan. Here are all the issues. This is how you fix them.
Mm.
The VP of that group looks at me and goes, "This is nice, but I want the opinion of a professional."
What?
Bro, when I tell you everybody in the room looked at me like, "Oh, snap." They was like, now mind you, this is like 2000, late 2015 going into 16. I've
Wow.
been doing this since '01.
For a hot minute.
I want the opinion of a professional. Wow. All right, cool. And my dad's words came back. Never give him an excuse. Cool, bet. I got on the computer, accessibility certifications, and I found the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. Looked at the criteria. At that time, the CPACC was the highest certification you can get. Cool, I'm going for that. I went through the study guide because one thing that I've learned is it doesn't matter how long you've been doing something, you don't use everything. Like I've been using Photoshop since version 1, right?
Yep.
I've never used every single tool in Photoshop.
Yep.
I design stuff in Figma. I have never used every single thing in Figma.
Yep.
You know, you just don't. And the web and technology is just so vast. Who actually has the brain capacity to actually go through and learn
Every single thing. Yep.
you know? So I went to DQ. They were recommended by the IAAP. It's like, yeah, go through their course. So I went through their course. It was cool. All right. Yes, there was a lot of stuff I knew. There were some things in there I didn't know. Cool. Got it. Went and took the test. Was awarded my CPACC. So now I am a certified accessibility professional. Bet. Now, no one can ever say, I want the opinion of a professional,
Professional.
because now I have those letters after my name. And for a while, you know, I used to feel some kind of way about putting the letters after my name.
Mm.
You know, I didn't always have it out there until one day somebody was like, you earn that.
Mm.
You earn that. You need to have that attached with your name. You earned it. So it was like, all right, cool, bet. That's what I'm going to do. So yeah, that's how it all began. But it takes time, but you have to start with the foundation. You have to have a solid foundation to do this. Now, if you are already a front-end engineer who is banging it out, honestly take a look at your HTML chops. How solid are they? You know, in our profession, we pick on engineers, because I did it too. I won't say that I didn't, but we picked on engineers who use divs as buttons, right?
Mm.
That's because it's a really simple example to use that we find all throughout the web. Somebody will have a div with an on click. You know, it's like, all right, start there. Do you honestly have code in your repo that is not semantic? Then the next question is, why? Why not use the semantic element?
Mm. So there's something I almost want to bring us back, because you said a lot of things that I thought was super useful that I don't want, people to just gloss over. Because I found it fascinating. It almost goes back to almost like the OG advice that we've gotten here. So if I take a look back at your journey, you started off with curiosity. How do I build a website? Then you found a resource, right? Which was the book. But you didn't just read it and close it and say, now I know how to do HTML, right? You learned how to do it, and then you did it. And then you started to build on it. And, happily ever after. We're here in this moment. You doing what you do best.
Yeah.
So anyone looking for the formula, that is the formula. Something that you also said that I found to be very interesting. I actually Googled it. My first and most frustrating experience with Flash was with a game on Facebook called Mafia Wars. I used to play that a lot,
Yep, I remember that.
back in 2010, 2009, and it was hellish because if Flash wasn't working, you don't get to play that game. It's that as simple as that.
It
So,
was a wrap.
so that was something funny. But back to it, I think you also said something, and that's where I want to almost go next. Is you said accessibility has exploded, and it's such a huge opportunity now. For someone who doesn't even know anything about this space, what does that opportunity look like?
Well, you have a lot of companies out there. Again, we have legal reasons to make our products accessible, right? We have the Americans with Disabilities Act, but it doesn't just stop with us. It's not just a US thing. There are 70 countries out there that have some form of accessibility on the books. Canada, they have several different accessibility laws, you know, throughout the rest of the world, Europe, UK, Africa. Like I said, 70 countries have accessibility laws. So what you're trying to do is just ensure that the products that you are working with, because we don't live in a confined space, the internet knows no boundaries, right? So everything that we're working on, someone else will have access to it. The European Union, they just came online with their the European Accessibility Act, which they are now enforcing. They started enforcing it as of June 28th of this year. Countries like Canada and Ireland, they started enforcing it, I think, like 4 or 5 years ago. So when you are working with a company that doesn't necessarily have an accessibility plan in place, it is very possible that your company could get onto somebody's legal radar, regardless of where you are geographically. So yes, it is blowing up. One thing that really casted or put accessibility in the spotlight was the pandemic. All of a sudden, everybody's at home. Well, what was the access that we had? Computers. That really started to show the cracks inside all of the applications that we were using, because a lot of people just did not have access or could not use those tools. It's not like you could actually go out to the store and do what you needed to do. You had to get on somebody's site, order it, and have it delivered to you. So that was what really started to
The
fuel
growth.
the boom, yeah, the growth around this. And here's the beautiful part about it, though. Even though this is a global concern, all the documents still come back to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It still comes back to the foundation.
So there's a framework and a standard that allows everybody to be able to do this on an
Yeah.
equalish basis.
Yeah, definitely equalish. Yes. Yes. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. Some things just don't
Yep.
translate. That's the reality of it. You look at a UX pattern and be like, what in the sin is this? It just doesn't translate. Does that mean you shouldn't try? No. You do the best you can with that. And a lot of times it requires you to go back to the drawing board. But this goes back to what I mentioned earlier about it being the user experience. Accessibility is it's UX. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines help you structure the user experience. you know.
That is great. And the you talked about it being uh, UX work, uh, engineering work, and all of that. What are the different roles specific within the accessibility engineering space? Or what are the different options that someone can look at if this was somewhere they wanted to be in?
Oh, there's a couple. Yeah, you don't have to be just an engineer to understand accessibility. If you're a designer, there are parts that apply to design. If you're a content writer, there are parts there that apply. You know, writing content so that someone can comprehend what is going on in front of them so that they can perceive it correctly and then understand what is required of them or what they need to do is very
Mm,
valuable. Design, we see it all the time. Designers, we're working on the UI that someone is going to interact with. Well, if you put together a design that is absolute rubbish, that's what the user experience is going to be like. If you design a flow that makes absolutely no sense, then that's going to affect everybody. And then from an engineering perspective, if you build something that doesn't make sense, that's definitely going to affect the way. So yeah, there's everybody's role. Accessibility doesn't just stop or begin with designers or
mm,
engineers. You know, it even requires leadership. Leadership has to be on board to support the decisions that the engineers and the designers and UX researchers and the content writers are going to have to make to ensure that the products are accessible to all of their customers.
mm,
You know, I was working on a contract gig, and I regularly met with their CEO. And first conversation I had with him, no, I take it back. It was the VP, and you know, in his mind, accessibility was only a design thing. I said, "What makes you think that?" He goes, "Well, it's just how it looks, right?" I said, "No, it goes way beyond that." I said, "Accessibility is everybody's
mm,
concern." I said, "It's your concern because you have to enable your team and allow your team to feel comfortable with making these decisions, even with the timelines that you have set
mm,
forth." And the way that I did this was that I led him through an empathy session where I asked him to do something very simple with his product: log in and add something to the cart without using his mouse.
mm,
He was barely able to do it with the keyboard.
mm,
And then I asked him, I said, now do this on one of your competitors' websites. Just so happened the competitor that he pulled up, they actually paid attention to accessibility. And he was able to get through like 90% of that process, you know. So he saw his role in that.
mm,
And when he saw his role in that, he then gave all the departments permission to explore the accessibility options that they have at their
mm.
level. So now you have an entire company that is coming together and working. Now they still got to get on the same
Facts.
page, you know, because everybody's going, this is my silo, this is my silo, this is my silo. They still all had to come together to actually understand how it all
Mm,
worked. And that was my role there. I was helping everybody to understand that. But you know, even through the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, they have certifications for anyone who wants to do documentation remediation, things like that. You can get certified, and that's all you do is look at PDFs and documents all day and make those materials accessible. If you work for a large corporation that is sending out, you know, tons of emails or any other types of communications, a
mm,
big one, finance. You have investors, your investor relations websites, they need to be accessible, all those documents, you know. So everyone's profession will touch accessibility at some point.
mm. And ultimately, what it is, as the name implies, is just giving equal access. Whether it's to information, to action, to getting
Hmm.
things right. Because we're differently able doesn't mean that we should, get different experiences, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So, um, what does a career path, or so going from, like, these are the things that you need to do it. What does that look like? Again, given that many of the people that I speak to are people who are trying to break into tech from other fields and industries. So that
Hmm.
context may not be there. So what does that look like? How do you go from, 0 to 1 as we're talking? But how do you even maybe get your first job? What do you need to do, building in terms of building up your skill level, building up your experience, building up to be able to get a job? You've been a hiring manager. You talked about the skills you were looking for. If I was completely brand new,
Hmm.
how would you advise me, and what would I need to show to you for you to be able to hire me?
One of the first things I would ask you is, are you familiar with the Web Content Accessibility
Mm,
Guidelines? If your answer is no, then that tells me that you are not authoring accessible code,
mm,
or you are not designing something that is
mm,
accessible, because you're not, you're probably not adhering to the
mm,
standards that are set
mm,
forth in that. So that's going to be the first thing I'm going to ask you, you know? And then if your answer is, yeah, I'm familiar with it, cool, you're familiar with it. I'm not going to expect you to be an absolute expert
mm,
at it. If you are, great. But if not, okay, cool. It's a start. You know about it. Then I will start to ask you, how does it apply to product
mm,
development? Those are the things. Then I'm going to start to pick your
mm,
brain. Am I expecting you to answer the way that I would answer? No. I just want to know how you are
mm,
thinking about it. Is it something that you are actually putting into
mm,
practice? And so, for anyone who wants to get into it, start with the Web Content Accessibility
mm,
Guidelines. Start there. I was working with a team of designers. A lot of times when people look at the WCAG, they see it as just a technical document and think that it only applies to engineers. No, it doesn't. It also applies to, like I said, content. It applies to design. Anyone who is involved in the product development
mm,
lifecycle, the rules that are in this document, or the success criteria that's in this document, will help you on your
mm,
journey. You know, I have a blog. It's writebadcode.com, but it's RIGHT, like to correct something. So writebadcode.com. And one of my most popular posts that I put up was, I took Jacob Nielsen's 10 heuristics that a lot of designers use when they are laying out a design or working on a
mm,
product. I took those 10 heuristics and then I aligned them with the rules that applied from the WCAG. And it shows you just how deep it actually
mm,
goes, because there's a lot that overlaps, but there are a lot of rules that apply even on the design side. So you start there. You start to build that
mm.
foundation. And then when you are looking at the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, you see how it aligns with the work that you are actually
Got
doing.
it.
So you're a designer, you're looking at those things from a design perspective. You're a content writer, you're looking at, language. Am I using plain language? Because what, here in the States, something like,
Eighth grade level.
I think it's like, yeah, but it's like 56% of adults here in the States are at a sixth grade level or
Yep.
lower, you know? So one of the main rules when it comes to writing content is, don't use a whole lot of industry
Yep.
jargon, because you may lose folks. I've been in meetings. I've been in meetings with folks where I'd see something on a website and I ask them, what does that mean? And I get different definitions from the people who work there. I'm like, so if you all can't agree on what this
How do you
means,
expect the
how do
guy
you
outside
expect?
who don't even know all of these things you guys are talking about?
Exactly. Exactly. So it's like, we have to use plain language. So, and a lot of this is It's in the WCAG.
Mm,
Start
mm,
there. That's the first brick you lay, regardless of what your profession is in tech. Whether you're a rookie or an absolute genius and been in the game for a minute, it starts there. That's your first brick for your foundation. Then you, like I said, you apply it to what you
mm,
do, apply it to your
mm.
discipline, and you start to work out with it.
And you know what's so interesting about what you just said is, of course, I do write a lot of tweets, content, and stuff like that, and also edit some of the work that my team does. And it's so interesting that
Hmm.
just looking at content, it's been that even more in the last since we had ChatGPT and all this other AI tools. You would think that so initially when the AI tools came out, they would try to sound super smart and super rehearsed and talk like they're PhD students or whatnot, but very quickly realized that that doesn't resonate. In fact, there's a guy on Twitter whose whole account is dedicated to promoting like AI content. So like he'll find a video of someone maybe breaking down
Hmm.
MCPs or something else like that, and this guy uses the
Yeah.
same caption for everything. He says, it's funny, I actually said the caption. He says, this guy breaks down MCP in 30 minutes. This guy does this in 15 seconds. This guy does that. And that's the thing. It's like, I mean, if you can't understand this guy does X in this thing, then you probably like you'll never get it, right? So it goes back down. It's like
Hmm.
with so much more information, right? The best way to get it to the most amount of people is to say it in a way that most amount of people can relate to, right? Like take away the
Hmm.
abstraction, take away the long, and that's another thing too. It's like
Yeah.
it says it in as little words as possible, right? He doesn't
Yeah.
say, "Oh, MCP is this Great Lake," or no, just something simple. This guy
He
does
gets
this
you.
thing. In fact, that's the whole to it. This guy does
Yep.
this thing.
That way, if you are looking for
This is
this,
yep,
it's going to
yep.
pop up. This is definitely it. But yeah, it is now.
And I'm sorry, the other one too is like the
What's that?
I think it's Berkshire Hathaway that
Uh
kind of
huh.
like does like the dumbed down version of like their investor note or something like that, where they break down the whole like disclosure jargon into like this simple
Hmm.
text.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like it's like we're not trying to confuse
Yeah.
you with like our like investment thesis. This is it.
Exactly. And why would you? Why would you? If you were only speaking to people in the financial sector, then that is compared to the population that could be your customer, that's a really small demographic. So you have to you have to use communication methods, like you said, that appeal to the masses, not just the people who are sitting in the building with you.
It's so mind blowing. Like when I saw that, it was like maybe a couple of lines too. It's like we don't bet on this
Hmm.
type of companies. This is what we do. Like so that you can understand in as plain a language as
Yeah.
possible. What is it that we
Layman's
do? Yep.
terms. Layman's terms. Yeah. It's the same thing when I'm teaching about
Mm,
accessibility. Um, I think I did a talk, was on a podcast earlier this
mm,
week. And when the link was out, I sent it out, family members, friends and everybody. I was just like, give me a critique. What I sound like? And my mom, she's a professional artist, that's where I got the design side
mm.
from. She is not a techie at all. Is she tech savvy? Yes. But is she a techie? No. But she told me that the way that I was explaining how accessibility testing happens or is conducted, she said I explained it in a way that she actually understood it.
Mm.
So it was like, all right, cool. Thank you. I like that feedback. Even when I first started speaking at conferences and going to meetups and things like that, one of the things that I learned in school, like I had a speech coach for one of my college courses, right? And I remember her saying, if you can't explain something in under 5 minutes, then you don't know what you're talking
Mm,
about. And I remember hearing that the first time. I was like, in my brain, I'm thinking, what do you explain what? I mean, I just saw this vast sea of all the different directions you can go. It was like an open world with tons of side quests that you can just get lost down. But then I started to realize what she actually meant was, can you break something down and turn it into a lightning
mm,
talk? Let's go for 10 minutes. What can you talk about for 10 minutes with zero
yep.
prep and get everybody to
Mm,
understand? She goes, the moment that you can do that, that's when you know that you can speak to people in
yep.
public. And I was like, oh, dang. Because when you know something, you find those analogies that you can grab to pull
Mm,
in, to compare to be able to tell the story, to be able to build that
mm,
narrative. Like I described what a design system is and how it works to my dad using golf
mm,
metaphors because my dad is an avid
mm,
golfer. I'm telling him, take your golf club, think of your golf club as an organism that is made up, and we're going to do atomic design. It's an organism that is made up of atomic
mm.
elements. Each part of your golf court of your golf club is a component that would reside in the design system.
Wow.
I said the code is a structure of your golf club. The CSS is how your golf club looks. And any of the JavaScript is how you mechanically use
Mm.
it. And he was like, okay, I get it. You know, being able to make information
Relatable. That's the
relatable,
word I was gonna say. Helping people just relate to it.
relate
It's a
to it.
superpower. And it's funny, like maybe not the critics example, but I love it either way. Like there's a guy who uses like, if you like hood terms to explain code, right? And it's yeah,
Wait, what?
and it's so fascinating. Like, so he'll say something like, imagine we're trying to hit the lick. This is like we'll write the code. This makes and maybe okay. So for example, maybe you say something like, we're all trying to hit like three houses at the same time. That means we'll write maybe something like a loop
Yeah.
statement. And then this one goes and gets, checks in the house if there's someone in there. If there's no one in there, then we can run up in the house and grab what we need and be out again and do this and do that. It's the
Not the
funniest
hood
thing.
developer.
It's the funniest thing ever. But it's like, and that's the thing. It's like, you've heard, maybe you probably have heard something where they say, if you want to hide information from maybe some people or whatever, put it in a book. But that's the thing, is like, why do we have to put the information in the book to begin with? Why don't we put information in a way that people want to consume it the most? Because if we know that there are learning
Hmm.
patterns that different people have, why are we not presenting information to them in that way so they can be successful? Because of course, go
You know
ahead, sorry.
why?
Yep.
You know why? Because that is not the mental model that a lot of people have.
Mm,
So let's look at it from a designer's
yep.
perspective. A designer starts to work on a new
Mm,
product design, a new
mm,
view. They have this nice ultra wide monitor, right? 35-inch, 3100 pixels, 4K, 8K
mm,
monitor. They got a lot of space to
mm,
play with. This real estate is gorgeous. They're going to use that real estate. They're going to
mm,
start there. I'm looking at my desktop. I'm looking at this monitor. I am going to
mm.
start here. And this is how I'm going to design this. You know what they didn't think
What?
about? The person who may have to pull this up on their mobile device.
Mm. Missed a completely
Everything,
huge group of people who you're not taking into consideration.
exactly. Exactly. And why is that? Because this is the mindset. This is the focus right now. I am looking at this on my monitor. This is how things are at. Cool. Now, what does it look like when it's smaller?
Mm,
What do you do then?
mm,
You know, we all have we all have these mental models. We all
mm,
do. It's how we navigate the world. We have schemas that we apply to everything. We learn it, whether it's a top down processing or bottom up processing, where you're taking things that you've learned and applying it to the real world, or you are just reacting to the real world and learning
mm,
how to navigate it. Things become, long term memories. You have things that are stored in short term memories. It is all, we are taking in all of this information around us that we are choosing to process. Sometimes we choose to filter it out. We take it all in, we learn, we build these models, and we carry those models with us throughout our lives.
mm,
When you first learn what a hyperlink was on a website, you
mm.
took that mental model of what that actually is and carried it to the next website. So
That's
when you
true.
saw a link, oh, I know I can click on this. Well, what happens when you take a hyperlink and now you change its characteristics,
What it means completely. It's
even
actually interesting.
visually, even
You
visually?
know, it's interesting that someone sent me a quote recently that I had to click on, and the payment link in the quote wasn't like a button that stood like very visible.
Hmm.
It was almost, like imagine if this was a physical invoice and it had a footnote.
Hmm.
That was where they buried the link to pay for it. So I went everywhere. I'm like, is this not the right email? Is this not? And eventually, when they said, "Oh, you pay in a thing," so I then went line by line by line till I then found it, and I'm like, "This is so silly," and that's the problem. It's like if your users have to do that much work to find the most important thing on the page,
Hmm.
you're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong. You did absolute zero user testing for one. But whoever designed that, whoever put that together, that made sense to them. That was their world.
Like I want them to read everything on the page first, and
Man,
then,
people read 7% of copy content on a page.
yep.
We not reading. We are scanning at best.
Yep. Like what's important to me. You
Yeah,
know?
what is it that I absolutely need? When I was working in ecom, it was what's important. Our marketing team, for them, they wanted to throw out all these clever marketing messages and things like that. Me and my team was like, they're not reading that, right? Nobody. It's cool that you have it there, but nobody really cares. They want to see what it looks like. They want to know how much it costs, and then they want to add it to cart.
Yep.
Because if it looks dope and the price
The
is
price
right,
is right.
they're adding it to their cart. It doesn't matter what poem you put with it. Now, no
Yep.
shade to content writers, none whatsoever, because there were a couple of content writers over there that wrote some fire content that was just absolutely hilarious. But we had to set the reality. It was just like a lot of people will not read this. And going back to user testing. So one day, marketing was like tripping on us. They're like, well, we want all these tooltips in there, and all these tooltips was hiding all of this content. We're like, guys, this is a bad idea. So we put tracking on all of the tooltip triggers. And after 3 months, we went back and we looked at the data. Now, on a daily basis, we would get well over like 1 million hits
Hmm.
to this page, right? Guess how many times those tooltips collectively, all the
Cumulatively
tooltips
over 3 months,
over 3 months, guess how many times they were triggered?
maybe 100 times.
Nah, double
Not
digits, double
double
digits,
digits.
double digits. But you know what buttons were absolutely crushed? Add
Which
to
ones?
cart, add to cart. So when we went back and saw the statistics on that, we were able to go to marketing and go, look, no one cares about those things. Can we
Mhm.
stop adding them? And then the VP of marketing, she was like, you know what? That's solid. We're gonna stop doing that. great. So yeah, you have to pay attention to your listeners or to your users.
Users.
It's what you just went through happened. That just tells me that that company does not want to collect money
Yep.
because
It's like
you were
there's no
not the
way
first
you're
person to
doing
have that
this.
issue.
Yeah, like, and in gray too. And it's exactly what you said, light gray on white text. So this wasn't even black, and it wasn't hyperlinked too. Like, and it wasn't like it's the fine print. Like, who reads the fine? See, I know what this cost me. We already have a conversation. Let me
Yeah,
pay and let me go about my day. Like, I have school stuff I've not even read. What do you mean I'm gonna sit on this page and read everything you wrote there?
nope. And that's the other thing. We always think that our stuff is important.
Really matters.
Yeah, yeah. In reality, no, it doesn't.
Because the funny thing is, even the content writer, the only reason why they probably read any other content they get in their email is to get inspiration for them. If they were anything but a content writer, they would
Hmm.
never read the other content. And even as their content writers, they probably don't read the other content marketing emails they
Oh
get.
yeah,
The
oh yeah,
only reason they read it is for their own selfish reason of making better content next time. Like, what's the competition doing?
yeah.
Not because they care about our content outside of that.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, people are going to people, and this is
Yep.
this is how people work, and it goes back to the mental models, the schemas that we all put together of how we collectively, you know, expect the internet to work.
Mhm. You know, it's funny. It's like the biggest type of content, and of course, I haven't seen the data on this, but the biggest kind of content that explodes on social media is comedy content, comedic
Hmm.
content, and also maybe like human interaction slash maybe like violence content. And
Hmm.
there's a common thread there. People don't watch the content for the content. They watch it for the expectation of a surprise, right? Because if there's a comedy sketch or a skit, you know something is going to change.
Yeah,
So there's already a
you're waiting for it.
promise of an eye-tight climax there.
Hmm.
Every other kind of content has gets skipped. That's why, in
Yep.
fact, the three things that Instagram now tracks on content is shares,
Hmm.
skip rate, and something else, maybe views. Those are the
Yeah.
three top three to share because for them, it's like if it's sticky enough that people want to share with their friends, and if they're watching it till the end, then it's valuable. So
Yeah.
everything else, it's not. We're not
Yeah.
gonna give it the light of day.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. It's like to your point, like not everything you think people should care about is what they care about.
Yep.
They care about what they care about.
They care about what they care about, and that's what makes this role so interesting because I care about accessibility. I care
Mm,
about building accessible products.
mm,
And I know engineers say that engineers, when, because I get a lot of engineers that approach me asking
mm,
about how to get into it, right? But I know that, designers also ask the same thing, but they ask, how can I care about it? And it starts with the curiosity, it starts with the empathy,
mm,
because you can say you want to do it, but if you don't actually start to make the moves to do it, then you never do. You
mm,
got to take that first step to get into it,
mm,
right?
mm,
And I remember having a conversation with one of my old managers,
mm,
and it was around just code hygiene in
mm,
general.
mm,
And one of my tasks was to level up everybody on the engineering teams as far as accessibility was concerned.
mm,
And he threw out the Boy Scout rule: leave the files better than you found them.
mm.
And when we started applying that to accessibility, you really saw the engineers really lean in heavy to it, because now they are thinking, I'm working on this file. Is this file in the best shape that it can be in,
Mm,
regardless of what it is? And another thing that we proved and showed that had value was that even a small change can have a large impact on
Mm,
how somebody uses the product. So that's when it went into, we would tell our engineers, if you see something that is not semantically correct, even if it's not a part of the feature that you're working on, but you're on that page, go ahead and correct it.
mm,
Next thing you know, I'm watching engineers update those divs with the on clicks to the actual buttons.
mm.
And then they saw just how a change to that particular component spread throughout the rest of the application. Well, by doing that, they enabled keyboard support. And so
Mm,
when we were actually able to see how, all these small little ripples, all these small changes had a larger impact on the application as a whole, it started to click with folks. It was like, oh, okay, now I understand why we leave the files better than we found them. Because it's not just this file that we are changing. We are
changing.
improving, we're changing everything else.
Mm,
It's like, yeah. And the same thing, I've led design system teams.
mm.
And my thing with design systems is garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
If you build a component incorrectly, it's going to be
Mm.
incorrect all throughout the rest of the app.
Yep.
So
Yep.
let's build it,
Absolutely.
so let's build it correctly. And then you see how it actually impacts in a positive way how users interact with your application. But it always starts with that first step,
Yeah.
recognizing what needs to happen.
That is so powerful. Like making a change can change everything.
Mm-hmm. Sure can.
I know we're at time,
Oh, that
but
went quick.
I don't. Yeah, it did. But I don't want us to end it without giving you a chance to do any shout outs or make any call outs for anything that you want people to check out or just pay attention to in general, or if you have any, big announcements coming, or where they can find you, etc.
You can always find me on Blue Sky. Look for me at circlebox.com on Blue Sky. That's XIRCLEBOX.com. Yeah, I'm going to be speaking up in Toronto this October. Going to be showing folks up there how to build a chat interface that is actually accessible. Because if you look at chat UIs right now, they're rubbish. So yeah, I actually have a working model that I will be demoing, and at some point in time, I'm just going to release that code out to the public so that everybody can use it. Then yeah, you can also catch up with me on LinkedIn, Homer Gaines. Find me there. I have my blog that I mentioned earlier, writebadcode.com, and you know anyone have any accessibility questions, you still want like links, resources, things like that, feel free just to hit me up. I'll respond. If you show up trying to troll me, you will get trolled back. So I do not play with that one. But yeah, definitely appreciate you having me on, man. Thanks for the invite. This was fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really appreciate you spending the time. And we're going to put the links in the comment for anybody that's watching. That's been Working in Tech tonight. Catch us again for another episode next Thursday when we have another amazing guest talking about a different tech topic and how you can break in. Thank you so